Today's podcast is brought to you by H&H Cologne at Home. H&H Cologne at Home is a 100% digital show. From March 26 to 28, 2021, Cologne Messe will present the latest trends and product innovations as part of the new comprehensive H&H Cologne at Home digital marketplace. You will find all fully updated information about your participation possibilities, new content, and prices of the digital H&H Cologne 2021 in the coming weeks on www.hh-cologne.com. Thank you so much, H&H Cologne at Home. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 184 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustryalliance.org. Today on the show, we're talking about creating a textile magazine with my guest, Polly Leonard. Polly is the founder of Selvedge, an internationally renowned textile magazine that was launched in 2003 and now has almost 100 issues to its name. From its modest beginnings on Polly's kitchen table, the magazine revolutionized the way textiles are presented and quickly became the world's leading textile publication, and now has a readership of over 75,000 and a dedicated international following. As well as a magazine, Polly has since launched an online artisan emporium, as well as the Selvedge World Fair, and creative collaborations with the likes of Liberty, Anthropologie, the National Trust, and the V&A. Polly has a specialist knowledge in all aspects of textiles, with particular interest in the role textiles has played in the evolution of humanity. Her own textile practice encompasses using weaving, embroidery, and basket making to produce sculpture. She's taught and lectured around the world. Selvedge combines her passions for social history, fine art, and craft. Polly Leonard, welcome.
Hi, Abby. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here.
And it's an honor to talk with you. I'm so excited to learn about Selvedge, this beautiful magazine that you've created. So I'd love to walk back a little bit and talk about your background. I know that you didn't really study journalism, even though you are in the magazine business. You studied embroidery and weaving. Is that right?
It is, yes. I came to embroidery through an interest in painting. I left high school, went to art school with the intention of becoming a painter. And through a desire to add texture to my paintings, I took a needle and thread and started stitching into my canvases, only for my tutor to point me in the direction of the embroidery department to tell me what I was doing was actually embroidery. So that's how I arrived at embroidery and weaving.
That's so fascinating. You just really wanted to add texture. Okay. And so you started to study embroidery and weaving. And then after you graduated, did you then, I know you came to the US at a certain point to get a master's degree. Was that directly after, or was there some work experience in between?
No, I graduated from Glasgow School of Art, and then won a scholarship and went to study in Philadelphia at the Tyler School of Art. And at that point, I was really very interested in the infrastructure there seemed to be in the US that there wasn't in the UK at that time. I developed my work. I moved probably from producing flat work to sculpture. Starting at that point, I didn't really know very much about basket making techniques. So I was making vessels through a technique called double cloth with weaving. And that that's where my kind of interest in supporting artists, I suppose the seeds were planted at that time. I then came back to the UK after my 2 years and did a teacher training course and became a high school teacher.
Okay. Right. And so you did that for a long period of time, taught high school. And was that satisfying? Did you enjoy being, I was also a teacher. I was a middle school teacher. And I know that it's very satisfying, but it's also, in my experience, very tiring, at least if it was for me.
I very much loved it. I worked in a great school, a school that was outside of the national school system, so it was an independent school. So I was pretty much left to my own devices. As someone who has lots of ideas, it's great being a teacher because you have all of these hands who, do all of the work to fulfill your ideas. So I had a great time and probably at that point thought maybe I'll end up being a headmistress. But I really, really enjoyed it. And I loved the fact that I had long holidays because during that long summer break, I did lots of traveling and carried on learning and thinking about textiles for all of those years I was teaching.
Yeah, right. It gave you that freedom. So it was like that combination. That's great. And then, but life changed. It sounds like when your life changed and that was becoming a mother.
It was, absolutely. So that was, I suppose, 21 years ago. My son's now 21. So I was at home with a baby and terribly, terribly bored. So at that point, you think, well, what can I do? So I started writing exhibition reviews and a few articles and just anything that I could do, around his schedule. And at that point, I was asked to edit a magazine by an organization called the Embroiderers Guild, which is an amateur guild of which there are many in the UK. And I did that for a couple of years. And then actually they sacked me because I overspent their budget. And I don't know.
What did you spend the money on?
On photographs, actually, professional photographs. So when I took over this magazine, it was very much a self-congratulatory amateur publication. Tiny little photographs, many of which were out of focus. And I was taken on to uplift the publication, which I did, but that obviously meant spending more on writers and photographers, which the organization was in two minds about, I suppose. They liked the idea, but perhaps the reality wasn't so successful for them. So at that point, I'd really got the bug. I'd really felt that maybe I'm not the only person who's not just interested in fine art textiles, but also interested in fashion and interiors and the social history of textiles. And I had one of those, moments of inspiration after a meeting at the Embroiderers Guild, where I thought, actually, there could be a beautiful magazine that has good quality writing that covers this entire spectrum of textiles. And that was when Selvedge was born.
Right. That's so interesting, and I love that. I love that they fired you for overspending the photography budget, because Selvedge, if anything, in my mind, is known for its photography. So that just sort of signified the future. So you had that vision, okay. And so, what was the next step? I mean, it sort of came to to you like what this could be. And you were home, a new mother. So what did you do? And this was, it sounds like the early 2000s, to make this actually come to life.
So I think it's very significant that it was in 2003. And I think if you look around, there are a lot of businesses that started in 2003. At that point, the internet was just big enough to support a niche publication. I think if I'd started it a year before, I would have run out of money before I got a large enough circulation to sustain the magazine. And maybe if I did it a year later, someone else would have done it. But I started in a very amateur way. Of course, by that point, I'd been teaching for 10 years. I was a member of lots of textile-related organizations. So I knew some people within the field. I put together, it was kind of like crowdfunding before crowdfunding. I made a very amateur A4 photocopied sheet of paper that said, I'm Polly Leonard. I'm going to make a magazine about textiles. Would you like a free copy? And I took that to a trade fair called the Knitting and Stitching Show. And I handed out those flyers saying, please contact me if you'd like a free copy. So I got enough. I got about 5,000 people came back to me and said they'd like a free copy. So I had enough money to produce one issue. And I did that, sent it all out with a letter saying, if you like this, please subscribe. I got enough subscriptions from that first mail shot to produce a second issue. So at first, it wasn't a bi-monthly. It was as and when I could afford to print another issue. And I suppose it took about 2 years to set into that regular printing schedule.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. And so you really did fund it at the start from your own savings, that first issue.
That very first issue, yes. Yeah.
Right. And it was just you producing it, the first one.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose it was a bit of a dream. You think, is it possible? Will people be interested? And I felt I just had to have a go at it. I don't know whether I knew it would be successful or not at that point. But you've got to try.
Right, exactly. And do you remember what you put in there in the first one? Like what kind of content?
I was super embarrassed by it. There was a Vivian, there was a exhibition at the V&A we had right at the very start, we had textiles from around the world. Okay. I felt and still feel very strongly you can't, I could not have put together a publication that was just UK-centric. Right. Because of the history of textiles, textiles was the start of globalization. They are connected in a tangled web that stretches around the globe. So not only did the circulation of the magazine have to be worldwide right from the start, but the content had to reflect that as well. So at that point, I had articles about new kind of high-tech technology textiles. There was fine art, there was interiors, there was a fashion story, a Vivienne Westwood fashion story. So it was a big kind of like a rag bag of things to do with textiles. Okay. In a very kind of broad sweep.
And do you feel like, even though you're embarrassed by the first one, of course, as we all are who've ever started something, and look back, but do you feel though that the vision you had initially is still in its essence the same as it is today?
Yes, I do. And that very first issue caused a real stir. People were really excited about it. I think it was the first time that I feel very strongly about, I love textiles. I feel they should be respected. the quality of the images, as you mentioned, and the writing and the production standards were far higher, or noticeably higher, I think, than other magazines that were available at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it's an unusual shape, and I think that's what marked it out from the very beginning.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about what makes for a selvage story. First of all, it is an unusual shape. Is it square?
It's square. And that is because when you're weaving, you weave on a grid. You have, warp and weft, and cloth comes on a grid. So everything about the magazine comes from textiles.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I hadn't realized the reasoning behind it being square, but I do recognize that it is an unusual shape for a magazine. And what makes for a selvage story? So you have produced, as we said in the introduction, 100 of these magazines since then. And when you're evaluating stories, because I'm sure people pitch stories to you, or you're just out in the world looking, how do you say yes or no? What to you makes something qualify?
Okay. It has to be very well written. That's a starting point. I like stories that have a reason for them being there. We tend not to publish I'm a designer and I work with artisans, and I enable them to, the artisans to continue weaving. That kind of story just doesn't particularly enthuse me. I've got a story I'm working on for our next issue about what is and what is not cultural appropriation. So looking at, I suppose, horror stories, and then looking at positive stories of where designers and artisans have worked together. I've got an article about the long-term legacy of the Charleston farmhouse. That was the residence of the Bloomsbury group of painters and artists at the beginning of the 20th century. And their legacy of textile design has ricocheted throughout the last 100 years. And we have an article about contemporary designers and artists who are influenced by that legacy. So that's the kind of thing that we look for.
And is there a bar for advertisers? Because the advertising is also very beautiful. And I wondered whether you'll take just any advertiser or whether you reject some.
That's a very good question. Especially now at in the time of lockdowns around the world where the economy is extraordinarily fragile, we do turn away advertisers that don't fit our vision of what textiles should be about, but also don't fit our aesthetics. I strongly feel that textiles today, which wasn't actually necessarily the case 17 years ago when I started the magazine, but sustainability in terms of environmentally and economic sustainability are something that aren't optional for textile designers today. The same with diversity. So those principles do guide the editorial content and the advertising content of the magazine.
I want to take a minute now to talk about our sponsor, H&H at Home. And here to do that is Darren Stern.
Hello, I'm Darren Stern. I work for Cologne Messe. We are the organizers of H&H Cologne, which takes place in Cologne, Germany. I'm based here in the Chicago area.
And tell us a little bit about what H&H Cologne is.
H&H Cologne, if I were to describe it, it's a Super Bowl for the soft crafts industry, whether it's yarn and knitting, fabrics, sewing, notions. The complete marketplace meets once a year, typically in Cologne, Germany, with over 429 exhibiting countries from 43 different nations, over 16,000 individuals, also converging all in one city for 3 days of fun and the love of soft crafts.
Amazing. And so this year, due to COVID, H&H is going to look a little bit different. So how is it going to work this year?
Correct. Unfortunately, due to the global pandemic, we've had to shift to continue to support the marketplace. It will not be feasible to provide a quality and safe environment in the venue this year, so we are switching to H&H at home. H&H and at home will be a full digital edition that is on a state-of-the-art platform that allows you to have live streaming of product demonstrations, one-on-one video calls, instant messaging, exhibitor showcases, knitting lounges, virtual cafes, and a complete immersive environment over multiple time zones to still allow the world to convene for 3 days to continue doing business, sourcing product, and networking for the greater interest of the industry.
Amazing. And so this is really an opportunity for people like myself who've been curious about H&H, but haven't been able to travel to Cologne in the past to be able to experience it.
Correct. The digital platform is the gateway, is how I would look at it. This digital platform allows you to kind of get a taste for it, see what the greater world has, start to understand who they are, who are the people, interact with those people, ask them questions, and then let you have an understanding of what the complete marketplace looks like outside of the US. And then leaving you back to 2022, where then again, we'll be able to convene and you can touch those products. You can shake hand and you can even build further on those relationships.
Darren, this sounds great. I'm excited for it. Tell us the dates.
H&H Cologne online or H&H at home will be March 26th to 28th, 2021. And then go ahead and plan on being back about that same weekend in 2022, but physically in Cologne.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Darren. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much, H&H at Home. And now back to my conversation with Polly. And what about the photography? What kinds of photographs are you looking for? Do you pay for photography? Just talk about in general your standards for photography and how the photographs in Selvedge work.
Okay, so I'm a little bit obsessive, and I will stay up all night, even now, 17 years later, to find the perfect image. Composition are always my kind of mantra. We don't publish snapshots, so all of the images within the magazine are considered in terms of composition. And I have a fairly specific vision for what makes a good composition. I grew up in Yorkshire, and I'm very influenced by the aesthetics of the Methodist chapel. So a very kind of minimalist aesthetic, which is kind of contradictory for someone who's interested in textiles, which are about embellishment. So I'm a textile enthusiast who's a little bit opposed to embellishment if it's not there for a reason. So that has given Selvedge, I suppose subconsciously, a very kind of clean look. So if I'm looking at images, I try not to have a distracting background, or if I can't find an image, or I can't, as has been the case this last year, if you can't commission someone to, a photographer to go out and shoot something, I'll then resort to illustration. And we've always, since the first issue, had 2 or 3 illustrations within each issue. And I think it's important for Selvedge to support illustrators financially, as well as to support photographers. And we do have a tiny budget that we stretch as far as we can, but we will pay for photographs if we can't find them for free.
Okay. And how important do you think it's been to the success of the magazine that you, as the founder, are a textile maker, a textile expert, a person who went to school for textiles, taught textiles for years, is a subject matter expert, versus somebody who came into this because they wanted to be a magazine expert, a media mogul, a person who was passionate about selling magazines or the business of media. So I'm just wondering, there's different reasons why people get into this business, and you got into it for a specific reason. And I wondered whether you think that has been a part of the secret of your success or longevity.
I think the magazine hit a moment where niche was the thing, really. And I think it wouldn't have successfully fit within that niche if I didn't have that specific knowledge. Our readership are amateur sewers. They are interested professionals who like something visually beautiful. But there are also academics, collectors, artists who have a very high level of very specific technical knowledge. And we pride ourselves on being accurate. So when I'm talking to new writers, what I ask for is academic rigor with a journalistic style. So we don't have footnotes as an academic journal would, but we fact check to the same level of detail. And that's really important, that if we're talking about weaving, we use the correct terms.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. And same thing with photography. So you said you had a small budget and you do send out a photographer and pay them if you can't find a photo for free. Do you pay writers as well?
Yes, we do. We do.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think one of the things that we've had to do when the magazine launched, there weren't a body of writers who had specialist knowledge within this area. So there are writers who write about fine art, and there are writers who write about interiors, but there wasn't a stable of writers with this kind of specialist knowledge. And we have actually ourselves had to nurture those writers. So we now have freelancers that we use again and again.
Mm-hmm. Who've developed the sources and expertise in this area.
Mm.
Yes. That's interesting. And I'm in that same boat now with Craft Industry Alliance as far as nurturing freelancers in the crafts industry. So I understand what you're talking about. And I wondered how you feel about that word craft. I feel like there's always this sort of push and pull about that word. And we've actually done a piece not too long ago about how we sort of need more than just that single word, because sometimes it doesn't quite describe things very well. It's sort of mixed with arts and crafts, which seems sort of like something a child would do, but it can also be elevated. And I wondered how you feel about that word craft.
I always, whenever I see, if I'm driving and I see craft fair, my instant reaction is to pull up and have a look because I'm endlessly curious. But I always, at the same time, think you have to be very careful about craft because it can be something other than what you're expecting. So I do feel everything has value. That value may or may not be aesthetic. So someone who makes something at home that's a fairly low level, that has a value for them. That's very important. There are many reasons why people make things. Selvedge chooses to present the highest level of that attainment. And we choose not to cover the lower end of that spectrum because there are other publications who do that. There are other places for that. And we offer inspiration is a thing that we often talk about rather than aspiration. So we, I suppose, guide, hopefully to bring our readers with us to aspire to the best something can possibly be, the highest level of design and the highest level of craftsmanship. And yes, it would be, in an ideal world, we would have a different word for something that children produce and something that is a beautiful work of craftsmanship that has taken a lifetime to acquire those skills.
And how do you feel about Etsy? I know you've talked a little bit in the past about Etsy, its pros and its cons, and I wondered what your thinking is now about Etsy.
I think Etsy has value. I think it has a great deal of value for those people who make and sell things. At the same time, it doesn't educate its audience as to what is good and less good design. And there are principles that guide what is good design. And that's something that's a little bit of a shame. But it's better there than not. I think it's important that, as I said a moment ago, there is value in all levels of work. And it's important that people have the opportunity to make and to sell their work and also to buy work that's at a very reasonable price. Craft shouldn't be completely elitist, but there needs to be some differentiation between something that's aspirational and something that is less.
And I wondered too about the sort of business model of Selvedge now. So you do have advertising, which is interesting. And I think about, I'm sure you're aware of Uppercase magazine,
yes.
Correct? Yeah. And so that's another very beautiful magazine that kind of comes to mind. Independently produced by a person Janine, who has a vision, so somewhat similar in but doesn't have advertising. And so I just thought, I wondered sort of when you're thinking about the business model, the degree to which ad revenue is paying the bills versus newsstand revenue versus subscription revenue, as sort of the three buckets. And I wondered, you know what I mean? And I wondered if you would be willing to share sort of the breakdown there, because they're each a bucket there for you, and she doesn't have one of those. She doesn't have the ad revenue piece, and I don't know whether you would be willing to share which of those three is, or how that breaks down for Selvedge.
So we've had a long time for this and it's ebbed and flowed over the years. We had a very lucky break right at, I think, issue number 5. The wife of the CEO of Barnes and Nobles saw a copy, loved it. So without us, when I started, I didn't know anything about magazine distribution. So they approached us right at the start, and we had Selvedge in lots and lots of Barnes and Noble stores. And that really, really gave a boost to us in the early days. So we made a significant portion of our revenue from direct sales through book stands.
And just to pause there for 1 second, and we'll get back to the main question there. But when you do distribute from the UK to Barnes and Noble, which is primarily in the US, how does that work? I mean, do they take a significant cut of each of those sales?
They do, and actually, what always I found a little bit distressing about that is they would trash the unsold copies.
Oh,
and that is, environmentally damaging.
Yes.
And just never seemed like the right thing to do. Interestingly, in 2020, as soon as the pandemic hit and the stores closed, we stopped doing all direct sales distribution. We now have a handful of art gallery stores and craft stores. And in fact, our revenue has not been affected by that. Now, whether that is because everyone's at home and they're reading more and buying online themselves, but I think it's very unlikely that we'll go back to that model because I now think it's very dated. The same with advertising. So 10, 15 years ago, we probably had 25% of the magazine filled with advertising, which was a significant part of our income. Today, and particularly in the last year, that has dropped to about 4 or 5% of the magazine. And the advertisements that we have today are almost a platform for companies that we work with and support to promote themselves. So rather than us going out and trying to sell advertising space, we tend to be reactive where companies come to us.
Okay, so they're coming to you, and then you don't have like an ad sales team or something like that.
I have a marketing a lady that works for us who does marketing, and she works out partnerships and a little bit of advertising, but it's very, very small. And at the same time, the subscribers have grown and single copy sales through the website have grown. So that proportion, it's probably 85 or 90% subscribers today, okay, whereas it was probably 30% 70
right.
years ago.
So interesting. And so that is actually really revealing that the business model has changed.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Over time. And I'm guessing you foresee it continuing to trend towards subscribers over time. Yeah. And I'm wondering, and you've added events as well as partnerships and a store to complement the magazine. The magazine's still the core, and these are things that support the magazine's vision. And do you feel, and we'll talk about each of those, but do you feel that the magazine could survive, I guess, without those things at this point?
It could survive. My job would be less interesting.
Right. Sure.
And Selvedge is a magazine that's not just about making a profit. That has never been our sole motivation. I don't know if you remember, Abby, but I mentioned seeing infrastructure in the United States for supporting artists. So there were galleries, and there was a magazine called Fiber Arts. This is way back in the 90s. In fact, the 80s probably. And there was nothing like that in the UK.
This was when you were in the US in Philadelphia for your degree.
Absolutely. And at that point, I was really interested in how that network, that infrastructure really supported artists and designers. And I saw when I'd graduated and then when I'd been teaching that a whole generation of talented artists who had graduated at the same time as myself had failed to survive because there weren't the galleries, there weren't the publications, there weren't events that would help enable them to generate income from their craft. So one of the mission of Selvedge is to support textile makers worldwide.
Right. And just as you've kind of grown your freelance pool, you've grown these events and these programs to help to support that mission. Okay, so let's talk now about the event. So one of these is the World's Fair. So what is that? And maybe pre-COVID times, what did that look like? What did that? Obviously, everything has changed, but what did that look like in the times before everybody was at home?
Okay, so it didn't start out as a World Fair. It started out about 10 years ago as the Selvedge Fair. And we had a little shop at the time. And next door to the shop was a very, a kind of cute, tiny church hall. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to bring the makers that we'd featured in the magazine to an event and invite our readers to come along, and they can buy their products and they can get to know the artists. And we had vendors selling designer-made products. We had textile materials and notions, etc. And we had vintage and antique textiles. And it was great fun. We had queues around the corner.
Wow.
And those grew quite quickly to be quite large events. And we had, even in the very early days, 1 or 2 international exhibitors. And then a couple of years ago, I decided, I don't know if the US is the same, but within the UK, there was a real boom in the craft fair. And there's a craft fair in London, pre-COVID times, virtually every weekend. And I felt Selvedge needed to bring our events more in line with the magazine and to make a point of departure from the many, many other competitor events. So we then developed a business model whereby we would have a selective event selected each year by a different panel of international judges. And the successful applicants, we would cover their airfare to London and their accommodation. I felt really strongly, and still do, that financial need, because we live, the world is economically unequal, that I didn't want to exclude artisans because of financial difficulty. So Selvedge would cover all of the expenses and take a percentage of the goods that were sold. And we'd spent about 2 years planning this, and we had our group of artisans. We had 1,000 applicants for our first event and chose 100 artists. And then COVID struck. So instead of cancelling the event, we thought, what can we do online to to bring as much of that content as possible. So we taught artisans how to do a Zoom presentation and to run a workshop via Zoom. And we had a whole host of, the best thing about it, I think, was a slow TV experience of 48 hours of live streamed slow TV from a weaving village, Bajodi in northern India, which was just charming. You could watch the weavers making a warp, and you can hear the birds singing and the cattle walking around. It was just very atmospheric.
Oh, yeah.
And we had 100 artisans, and they sold their products, and the event was incredible. And although we will in the future, I don't know whether it'll be next September. We're kind of sitting on the fence at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Have that as a live event, but there will always be some sort of digital element. Because our readers are geographically widely spread, it enables all of the readers to engage with that rather than just those who could travel to London.
Right. Now that you've had that experience of doing a successful digital experience, you see how it can go and reach everybody. So it's a silver lining, honestly, of this sort of terrible year, which is good. And then what about these partnerships that you've done with some of these companies that we mentioned and also museums that we've mentioned in the introduction with Anthropologie, with the National Trust, the V&A. What have those done for Selvedge, or how, I guess, would you evaluate a partnership opportunity? Because I'm sure there have been others that have come by your desk that you've said, that's not quite right for Selvedge. Whereas these ones were ones where you've said, yes, let's do this. And so maybe talk a little bit about why these worked and those others didn't work for the brand.
So Selvedge has an educational mission. My personal peeve, I'm just going to go a little bit roundabout, Abby. My personal peeve is that if you ask your average person in the street what is cloth or what is textiles, they would probably, something would come into their heads, something that was like a T-shirt, a cotton jersey, or a man-made fiber, or a pair of jeans. So it would be a very narrow vision. If you asked the same question 50 years ago, you would have a very different idea. The fibers that are available around the world and the textile techniques that are available around the world are huge. And it's a vast resource of wondrous things that we never see today. We rarely buy anything made of mohair or alpaca or linen even, all of these wonderful fibers and interesting weave structures or interesting hand knits. So that educational mission directs our partnerships. So if our partnership provides an opportunity for Selvedge to communicate that vision of the wondrous world of textiles, then for us it's successful. And if it doesn't, then they tend to be a lot of work for not very much return.
Got it.
That's kind of...
Yeah. Right. And I think that's a great lesson just in general for business owners to think through, like, what do you care about? And then how do you use that to determine what to say yes to? And you have such a clear vision for that. So I think that's really great to hear. And I wondered, you are really at the center of this magazine, and I wondered now, you're at 100 issues. If you have, I think you know where this is headed, but if you have thoughts about a succession plan, if you will, or what would happen beyond your personal involvement at some point, because your vision is so clear, and yet, obviously you can't do this forever, however much you clearly would want to. So what would happen next?
That's a very, very good question, actually. I suppose you've hit a nerve, Abby.
I didn't mean to, to make you sad, but.
In fact, interestingly, if I said, what's the element of success and what's the element, the element of failure, I think I myself fit both of those categories. And I think the magazine is not bigger than it is because I am preoccupied with the minutiae. And I think the magazine is as successful as it is because I'm obsessed with the minutiae. So that's just as it is. A succession plan, gosh. My daughter is interested in writing. She's currently at university doing English literature. I would love her to take over one day. Whether she will, whether that's something she wants to do or not is entirely, her decision. If that plan doesn't work, then I work with a very good team. My features editor, Laura, is fantastic. And she could carry this on alone in the beat of, in a second. So there are people who I would trust to continue the mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've indoctrinated them over the years.
I'm sure you have. Okay. I think the only other thing that we wanted to talk about before we get to your recommendations was the winter of making.
This is an idea that I had back in September after 6 months of pandemic. And textiles have value, in many ways, aesthetically, intellectually, etc., etc. They are the history of humanity is entirely linked to textiles. We wouldn't be where we are today without them. And one of the important, maybe it's a side effect, is that it improves your mental health, making something. There's been masses of research that states that, to knit, to sew, to make, to create, and particularly with textiles, boost your mood. And I just felt that many of our readers would be in need of that this winter. So we embarked on a program of, that's where the podcast came from, and we do Zoom workshops and Zoom talks, and we have a chat room where we encourage our readers to share their projects. And that has been incredibly successful. The workshops sell out as soon as we do them. And we can offer interesting classes that we would not previously have been able to offer. We have tutors in India and in Mexico and participants in South Africa and Japan and wherever. So that is a wonderful network that's come out of this most terrible of years. And we will continue that. We have plans for other things to do with making, and that's a side of the business that we will be growing into next year.
Yeah, a little bit more hands-on, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. And a natural extension, I feel like,
Yes.
and another silver lining. That's wonderful. Yeah. So I want to get to your recommendations, some things that you've been doing during lockdown in the UK. And it sounds like you've been attending some Zoom workshops yourself. And one of them was, it looks like on Swedish wool embroidery.
Yes. That is a wonderful lady, Anna Karen Jobs Amberg. She is from the south of Sweden and in a place where people still regularly wear national dress, which to me is very interesting. And she taught a workshop how to do traditional Swedish wool embroidery. And it was wonderful to learn a new skill, to have a conversation, when we're all locked in our houses, and just an entirely positive experience. She sent a materials pack full of, the right colors and the right weight of yarn. From my teaching, way back when, I feel very strongly that the materials are extremely important if you're starting a project. If you get the wrong materials, you've failed before you've even started. And that is such a wasted opportunity that we encourage all of our tutors to provide a materials pack. And that in itself is quite exciting, to receive a pack of hand-spun yarn from, say, India. Is quite a thrill in itself.
Absolutely. And then the anticipation of being able to learn to use it. So great. So that's wonderful. And we'll try to link, even if she doesn't have an upcoming workshop, to her website so people can see what the work looks like. Yeah, absolutely. In the show notes. And you've been knitting some socks as well.
There's a charity for homeless people in the UK. So I have been knitting socks for that charity. And I think socks are great because they don't take too long. And they're really interesting because you have lots of different techniques. You've got increasing and decreasing, and you graft the heel, and it's just really interesting, different techniques within a small scale. So it takes me, I don't know, maybe a week to knit a pair of socks. I knit 2 socks together on circular needles, and it's just quite interesting and quick.
I've never worn a pair of hand knit socks, but I see them all the time on my Instagram. And I'm not a knitter. My daughter, who's 16, is a knitter. And she's actually looking for a project right now. She just made some gloves. So maybe I'll put her on some socks. That would be for me. That would be nice. And then you also mentioned it's the ETN. Is that the European Textile Network?
That is.
Is having a free membership.
Yes, I just wanted to promote that for them. They're a fantastic organization. They have the headquarters have recently moved to Haslar in northern Austria, where they have a textile museum and they do workshops, and they have very generously offered free membership to anyone until the end of the year. And they have great resources. And I would just recommend anyone to go and have a look at their website and look around and see what there is. It's just a really nice, supportive thing that they are doing during this pandemic time.
Terrific. That's great to know about. Thank you. And Polly, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you so much, Abby. It's been great fun.
And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today's episode was brought to you by H&H Cologne at Home. H&H Cologne at Home is a 100% digital marketplace. From March 26 to 28, 2021, Cologne Messe will present the latest trends and product innovations as part of the new comprehensive H&H Cologne at Home digital marketplace. You'll find all fully updated information about your participation possibilities, new content, and prices for the digital H&H Cologne 2021 in the coming weeks on www.hh-cologne.com. Thank you so much, H&H Cologne at Home. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. When you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustryalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.